Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Katie, I'm a mixed media artist, and in today's video I want to talk about starting a new sketchbook. So a couple of videos back you'll have seen that I was finishing my sketchbook and I posted a sketchbook tour, and that was before Christmas. So I had a couple of weeks before I actually started this one on New Year's Day. I was really procrastinating starting. I really felt that first page fear that I know a lot of artists get as well. Usually I don't. Usually I'm raring to go into my new one because I'm usually doing a challenge. So last year I was doing a 100-day challenge when I finished one of my sketchbooks, so I kind of didn't have that thinking time between them. Whereas this one I wasn't doing any daily challenges or anything, and so I really felt like I was putting off starting this sketchbook. So today I want to talk about a few different tips and things that I've heard and that I want to share when you are starting a sketchbook, and then also share the process of this landscape that I'm doing on the very first spread. So it wasn't that I wasn't creating art within those 2 weeks, but I was using different sketchbooks because for some reason this big blank page was really scary to me. I love creating and I really enjoy it, but for some reason I think we put on a lot of pressure as artists on ourselves when we are starting something new. Starting a completely new sketchbook that hasn't been touched before can be daunting. I think we want ourselves to create the best piece of art, that we want to set a precedent for the sketchbook as we go along. We want it to be really good, which is something that I'm constantly working with as an artist because I don't believe in good or bad art. And I've talked a little bit about that on my channel. And it's also very apt for today's video because to me this wasn't very successful. It wasn't the artwork that I was hoping to make for my first spread. So I'm going to be talking about that because I was a little bit unhappy with how this turned out, but it doesn't matter to me because I started my sketchbook, and that was the main aim for this session. I did obviously want to try and create some artwork I was proud of and pleased with, but the main aim was to just begin. So for me, that meant I wanted to create something that felt comfortable to me. I absolutely love drawing landscapes, so as a subject, that was the one that I really wanted to do. If you're unsure about how to start yours, I definitely recommend choosing a subject you feel comfortable with. Sometimes it can be really difficult to start something where you're unsure of or you're not confident with creating your marks. And although sketchbooks are a great place to experiment, I think for our first spread, we should go with something that we know we like to draw and is more in our comfort zone. So that's why I picked this landscape, which is referenced from a book I bought from a charity shop called The British Isles. And as you can see, I'm using some acrylic markers. So again, I wanted it to be nice and easy, and these were well within reach and just meant I could just grab them and go. I'm using a mix of Montana markers that I've mixed myself, as well as Molotow markers and some other ones that I've picked up on my travels. And I am trying to keep things nice and loose. I was mostly aiming for texture in this one and just to try and create a really nice feeling. It definitely feels more summery, especially compared to the wintry scenes that I finished my last sketchbook with. But again, I really wanted something in my comfort zone. The wintry scenes were a little bit more experimental for me, and I absolutely loved them. But like I said, to start this one, I wanted something easy. And for me, these colours are definitely my comfort zone and my go-to. It's definitely my type of green with the sort of olivey yellow undertones and the nice sky blue. So I am picking colours that I feel confident using and also layering those with my Neocolors and coloured pencils, which you'll see I used to try and build up a lot of different texture and add on different tones to the base layer that I've already put down. So I was talking about this on my Instagram when I shared this spread earlier this week, and a lot of people shared their tips, which I thought was really helpful, so I want to share them in today's video as well. I found it really comforting knowing that a lot of artists also feel this fear, and I think it's really easy to look on social media and think that people don't, because if I had posted this without mentioning that I was procrastinating it for so long, you wouldn't have realised that it took me 2 weeks to actually begin. And so I think it's really helpful to share things like that. I find it really comforting when other people share it, and we do sometimes put artists on pedestals when we see them online, depending on how successful we feel they are or how big their audience is. But at the end of the day, I really do think that all artists go through the same issues. We all may feel that fear when we're creating, when we start a new sketchbook and we want it to be, in inverted commas, good. And we also have times of things like not feeling very inspired, of burnout, of not liking the work that we create. So I think it's really important to share, and I hope that it makes you feel in the same boat as well. So one of the really common ideas for when you are starting a new sketchbook is actually to start on a different page. And I had a few different artists recommend this for me. So they start in the middle of the book, they'll open it at a random page and just start creating there. And I can definitely see how that works because it's not a completely blank sketchbook then. You've already broken it in. But for me, it feels very odd to not start at the very first page, and I do wonder if I would ever come back to the first page. I guess if you are feeling really inspired and you've started filling other pages, you might go back to the first spread. But I really like the idea, and I think it does help because it does start that sketchbook for you without the pressure. I think it being the very first page does mean it's the first thing you see when you do open your sketchbook. And so I think that's where a lot of the pressure comes from. But I like the idea of starting in the middle, so if you are struggling and you like that too, then it's definitely a good place to start. Another tip I got was to create collage, so one artist recommended doing that. They said that they started doing it because it felt like less pressure for them, and I think that's a really great tip. So collages to me feel a little bit easier than creating a full piece. So I can definitely see how that works. You can layer on different mixed media, you can layer on bits of your own artwork, which I really like, and I do want to experiment with this year. And it just feels like it's a bit lower stake. And I think you can create like a starting page where you collage in lots of different things, maybe even make a mood board of lots of different art that you really are inspired by. I think that's a really nice way to ease in and something I might do for my next sketchbook. The other thing I want to focus on when starting a new sketchbook, and I think is helpful to pass on, is to change our mindset. And I mentioned this in the beginning of the video, but I do think it's really important to take away the idea of creating good art. For me, my mindset for 2024 is to just create. I think the act of creating in itself is such a big win that it doesn't matter if you're creating something that you don't really like, because I've mentioned before on my channel that I think all art leads to good art, or all art leads to something that you will be proud of. So even though it might feel bad at the time, you don't know where it will lead, or the techniques that you've used may lead into something else in the future. So for me, I really want to take that mentality into 2024 and not worry about what I'm creating being good. The whole act of creating is enough for me, and I really want to focus on that. I think it's more important to just put pen and colour to paper than it is to create a piece at the end. And I've mentioned that a few times, especially with my plein air work, that I don't necessarily like the end result, but I absolutely loved creating it. I definitely found that with this piece. Although it wasn't how I imagined it would turn out in my head, I still enjoyed it, and the main aim was to get creating and start the sketchbook, and so it did do that for me. So it's still a win, even if it's not how I imagined it would be in my head. I'm still really pleased that I broke down that barrier of entry and started my sketchbook in itself. I did start liking the spread a bit more when I started adding on these foreground elements. I wanted to add on a pop of colour, so I picked these purple thistles, which felt a little bit less summery, a bit more wintry, although the landscape does feel like it is in the summer. I'm really glad that I added on this pop of purple. Purple isn't something I use a lot in my work, so it felt nice to actually use those Neocolours, and I do think that the contrast of this darker green in the foreground really helped to add a different layer to this landscape. The other thing I find in sketchbooks is that after some distance and time, you might like it more. I think after looking at this like a few days later and even a few months down the line, I'll like it a lot more. And to me, I think that's because I've kind of forgotten what I wanted it to be. I don't often go into things knowing what it will be like, but I do feel like sometimes things don't meet up to my expectations. And when I look at it down the line, I've forgotten what that was, so I can see it as it is. And so I think that's why a lot of distance helps, and I think it's really important to continue working through the sketchbook, even if you have created something that maybe wasn't what you would hope for. Just because you might have created a spread that you're unhappy with doesn't mean the rest of your sketchbook will have anything to do with that. I know it's tempting to rip it out or start again, but I think it's really important to keep it because, like I said, you might like it later down the line. All art leads to other art, so I don't think it helps us by ripping things out or throwing it away. It also helps us see our development. So from the very first spread in our sketchbook to the end, you might see that you're better with color or composition, and you wouldn't be able to do that comparison if it wasn't there. So maybe it's actually a good thing if you're creating something in your sketchbook that you're unsure of at the beginning, so you can see more of your growth by the end of it. So you can see here I'm just adding on my finishing touches with that sky blue Neocolor, which I love to add into my landscapes. But I hope you've enjoyed watching this process and found it helpful if you are going to be starting a new sketchbook soon. It's totally normal as an artist to feel that fear, so I hope this has given you some comfort, and if you have any other tips to share, please do share them in the comments down below. I love this YouTube community and over on Instagram too for us sharing our tips, and I think it's really important for us to share the good as well as the bad. I'll leave you with the finishing touches and some shots of the final piece, but thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. A huge thank you to my Patreon community for supporting me making these videos, and I hope you have a creative year ahead. I'll see you next Sunday with a new YouTube video. See you later.